Good day to you, listeners. We've been expecting you now that the podcast is open once more. I hope you've brought your best headphones, for your ears are going to be greatly treated. In fact, they just won't believe what's waiting for them. But why wait? Please, listen now, if you dare. Welcome, listeners of Illusion to Temporal Discussion, the episode-by-episode Nightmare Retrospective podcast. I'm Martin Harder, and I'm only here for the fear.
And I'm Martin Odoni, and I am fear. No, I am.
I am Jake Collins, your friendly and highly skilled sound editor for this episode of Temporal Discussion. I'll be butting in from time to time with my own comments, because I can.
And today we'll be looking at episode 1 of series 5, which aired on CITV on Friday, September the 6th, 1991. Bryan Adams was topping the singles charts with Everything I Do It For You, and believe me, he was doing it for a very long time.
The dirty bugger.
And Terminator 2 Judgment Day was topping the UK box office, and we probably said about as much about both of those as we possibly could.
Just a little bit, yeah. Just a little smattering summary, yeah. I have to say, all these weeks after we recorded it, I'm still bored of hearing about it. So let's move on.
Yeah, and I think we've still got Everything I Do It For You for some time, haven't we?
Yeah, it's got stuck in our heads since then. It's actually a very nice ballad. It's just I don't want to hear it for 16 straight weeks.
You're listening to Temporal Discussion, bringing you the latest news from 1991.
In the news, the day before the series premiered, September 5th, the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union and the State Council of the Soviet Union take over after the Congress of People's Deputies of the Soviet Union dissolves itself. And a few days after the episode, on September the 8th, after gaining independence, the Republic of Macedonia starts a naming dispute with Greece. The things men will find to fight over, as I believe Gulliver once said. He's got a point.
Do you know much about this naming dispute?
Not a great deal, no. It's got something to do with Alexander the Great, because he was a Greek ruler, but he was actually a Macedonian. So there's some kind of historical aspect to it, going back a very long way.
So what was the actual dispute itself?
Well, as far as I know, the Greeks just didn't want it to be called Macedonia because there was an area of ancient Macedonia that was part of Greece. And so they had to find another name for it. And that's when it became known as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, to try and distinguish it from Greek Macedonia. So
okay.
That's why it's officially still called Fyrom, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
It does seem a bit petty, doesn't it?
It seems incredibly petty.
And now time turns. The recording light burns. Timeout is gone. The podcast is on.
Good day to you, travelers. We've been expecting you now that the path is open once more. I hope you've brought your bravest and your best, for they're going to be sorely tested. In fact, they just won't believe what's waiting for them. But why wait? Please, step inside, if you dare.
We get treated to a little pre-credit sequence with tray guards replete with an Obi-Wan Kenobi-style hooded cloak stand in front of the gates of Nightmare Castle. Anonymous Heartbeat plays as he invites us to begin the greater game again.
Are we sure it's a cloak and not a brown bath towel? I was looking at it very, very closely the other day, and I think, are we sure that's actually a cloak? Well, I wonder where they got it from, because it's definitely not the cloak that Cedric used to wear, and the other one was surely allocated to Brother Mace for another year. So another observation I have to make is that Hugo definitely let his beard grow too long in this season. It almost seems to be weighing down on his head, forcing him into a stoop.
We'd like to welcome our listeners to the first episode of Beard Watch.
It certainly won't be the last.
Dragon's breath. But someone's let the fire burn low, and if it should burn out, you wouldn't believe what would crawl in here and make itself comfortable. Pickle! Where are you, you pesky elf?
Here, master. Sorry, But I was miles away. About 4 miles away, and about 12 months ago, to be exact. I was just re-experiencing some of last season's adventures.
Well, you're late. The season has begun, and the Watchers are already with us.
Oh, so they are. I must admit, I can't get used to the way they all cram in here. Greetings, adventurers.
Traegard gives us the old Bertram stare, and if you don't understand that reference, check out the free indie horror game Frontiers of the Mind on PC, hashtag not sponsored, as he exclaims that the first challengers are at the threshold.
I'm afraid this opening does drag a little. I never really wanted Traegard to get an assistant, as you know, and the interplay between Hugo and David Lerner here, it'd be fine in a sitcom, but it rather slows down the start of the season. Oh, and where did that staircase appear from in the entry portal?
Enter, stranger. Pickle, the book and the pen, there's no time to lose. A name, age, and direction, please. And make it plain that the elf's still half in another world.
I'm Kathryn Croucher. I'm aged 14, and I come from Liphook in Hampshire.
Liphook? There'll be more than enough of that, Master.
Is this the first time they specifically asked for Dungeoneer's age? I don't remember them doing that before.
I think so. I think Hordris asked for it a couple of times when he was giving out the mini quests in season 4. I'll have to double check that, but I think it's the first time that's at the entrance to the dungeon at the start of the quest that they're asking for the age. Thank heavens this isn't a series for pensioners, because there'd be so many Dungeoneers responding, over 21, Sonny. It's a slightly intrusive question, isn't it?
Yeah. So Kathryn calls her advisors Raelene, Faye, and Alison, who all hail from Liphook. All the girls are dressed in yellow t-shirts with black trousers, which brings Pickle to remark that they must be the B team.
Traegard's habit of silencing Pickle by clearing his throat really goes into overdrive this season, and I'm just banging my head against the wall by about midway through the, oh, stop doing that, it's just not funny.
So this was 1991.
Yeah.
I was 8 years old. This was the year of my first crush, Christina Ricci, in the Addams Family.
May I have the salt?
What do we say?
Now.
My second crush was Raelene.
Oh, okay. So you were a bit hyperactive a bit early on that front then.
Traegard tells the team they are in a strange land and that the team must pledge to find one of the 4 quest objects in order to conquer it. In a first for the show, the team are asked to decide which objects they wish to quest before Kathryn has even been given her quest equipment. Raelene chooses the cup, so we know they're going to lose.
Oh, well, that's them certain to lose then, which is what I put in the notes.
And none of the other team members voice any objections. Pickle places the knapsack, the eye shield, and the helmet on Kathryn, and Traegard explains the in-universe function for each object. Whereas the team would discover the eye shield in Series 4, it's now given to the Dungeoneer in the antechamber. Apparently this was at least partly because the kids had trouble putting it on themselves.
Yes.
Notice how when Traegard lifts the helmet to put it on the Dungeoneer's head, you can clearly see the foam padding inside.
It would be funny when Traegard checks to make sure she still wants to embark on the quest if Kathryn responded, actually, I'm getting the willies here. I think I'll give it a miss. She doesn't.
Very well. Let me guide you for the first and last time. There is a portal before you. Which path it will put you on, we cannot say, for these things act randomly. Step forward now and step into your adventure.
Kathryn, you're in a room, a very long room, and you've got the sky straight in front of you with a kind of dragon thing.
Ah, yes, team. I think this is the equivalent of what you would call an international departure lounge. And the next flight is leaving shortly. Do you know this worm, Pickle? Can it possibly be trusted?
Who can tell, Master? Who knows? Dragons tend to look alike, but they're comparatively rare in these parts. So I would guess this is one called Smirkenorf. Or at least that's as close as I can get to the pronunciation.
So, we're finally underway. And we start in the International Departure Lounge.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a better name for it. It's what Traegard calls it, so that's what we're going with.
It totally fits the context of a sort of late medieval dungeon quest. Yeah, it's a common feature. Heathrow Airport, let's face it, is very medieval.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a nightmare as well.
It is. So I fully approve of the terminology.
That's another excellent example, as well as elves don't have advertising breaks, of the mix of fantasy and reality, medieval and modern, that I love so much in Nightmare. Whenever a character shows knowledge of our time, our world, particularly Treguard, to crack a little joke like that, that always gets a thumbs up from me.
Kathryn begins her quest on a platform just beyond the large set of doors. In front of her, we see the great worm Smirkanor for the very first time.
Believe it or not, I've walked on the scales. I really wish I could see. We're flying so high, I hope we don't fail. Who could this dragon be? Believe it or not, it's Smirky.
Smirkanor, or Smirky, as he will affectionately become known to some in later episodes, begins his existence in Nightmare as a mute character whose sole purpose at this stage is to provide the dungeoneers with a rather spectacular method of entering the dungeon. As Kathryn takes a seat and the dragon takes flight, we can fully appreciate the detail that puppet maker Mark Cordroy put into creating him. It almost distracts us from the fact that the helicopter, very obviously used to film the flying footage, is really just circling around and landing back where it started. And in hindsight, that sort of problem was never disguised very well at all. And there are numerous outtakes of this sort of footage when the helicopter actually projects a shadow on the ground. One of them gets used over the closing credits of an episode in season 7.
They tried to hide it by occasionally cutting to a side view of Smirky.
Yeah. Which is the wiser thing to do rather than putting up on the credits and then sort of really showing the workings. One thing I think we can all let out a shared sigh of relief for is that there isn't any more of that preposterous purple haze all over every background as there was in season 4.
No.
Thank goodness for that, because it really was horrible.
You say that it's a spectacular way of getting to the dungeon, but I don't think it's referred to as the dungeon in this series.
It's a lot rarer to refer to it as the dungeon, yeah.
Mm.
I think maybe you're going to land now.
In the middle of the castle. It's kind of grand.
Yep, I'm just going to land. We've landed.
Hardly a bump.
No.
Well, I think it's time to dismount.
When Kathryn lands within the grounds of this ruined castle, she dismounts and the Ice Shield passive bath takes over, leading her inside the castle. And so, of course, she arrives in the Wolf Glade.
And I tell you what, you thought the passive paths were overused in the last series.
Yeah, they were.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Okay, now you're out in the wood and there's lots of tree stumps around. So be a bit careful. Yeah, there's a black thing, a kind of portal, and you seem to be heading straight around it, so just keep walking.
Signs of human habitation, perhaps, Master?
The passive path takes Kathryn to a clearing of a crude-looking shack, in front of which Brother May sits with a new companion. This is definitely one of the weaker aspects of the shift from season 4 to season 5, which is the continuity between scenes, as we've already touched upon, has really gone Kaputski again. It's like we're back in season 1. It's an absolute nonsense that there was a castle in the previous scene and entering it takes them into a forest. One thing I can say in defense of season 4, and there aren't many things I can say in defense of it, there tended to be more logical progression. You know, when you enter a castle, the next scene's going to take place inside a castle. Unfortunately, season 5, they've gone back to just putting things in a random order, it seems. That might make it more interesting in terms of it's less predictable, but it doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah, they're leaning much heavier into the whole, they're not doorways, they're portals aspect.
Yeah, they're transporting you across wide distances like the elf paths. So the elves obviously got into an awful lot of places.
Greetings, traveller. Perks for Biscombe and park your backside over here on one of these splendid logs. Nature's throne, so to speak. Sit yourself down. Now, do excuse us just for one moment whilst we finish our game.
Okay, there is a monk and some sort of creature, a man, I think. Okay. And they're playing cards around a tree trunk. Or something.
They're playing for money.
Playing for
money or something.
Yeah.
Cool. Ah, sad, so sad. My Rex claims victory over your mere Regina.
And Kim, I know you're listening to this and giggling. He said Regina. It's Latin for queen. Having won the pot, Mace introduces himself and his companion, Sylvester Hands, played by Paul Valentine. Mace says that he wouldn't stoop so low as to call Sylvester a thief, but he wouldn't play cards against him if God wasn't on his side. Hands denounces this statement as unkind, unchristian, and uncalled for. This isn't quite the same snivelling little sly Hands that we love to hate, but maybe Lord Fear hasn't quite broken him in yet.
Yes, it was to take a while for Valentine to settle on Hans' personality and even his voice. There's a scene coming up in the next episode, I think, when he basically just plays Hans as Motley. He actually comes across as quite streetwise and sinister here, but in later times he's reduced to a gibbering idiot. And I think that's a shame, actually. It's the same sort of removal of threat process that Gumboil went through in the first couple of seasons.
Yeah.
He's more interesting, his Hands, when he's just a bit shifty and a bit devious. Just reducing him to sort of comic relief imbecile, which was what happened to him. I think the series kind of shot itself in the foot a bit by doing that to him. It reduces the threat of the opposition.
I still like Sly Hands, though, even as a comic character. It's very well played.
Yeah.
I think very well, not fleshed out as such, but, very well placed character.
He had a function that might have been served slightly better by him being reduced to an idiot, but just in terms of the role he plays, you just don't feel like anybody's in any great danger from him because he can be fooled so bloody easily. Same with Fatilla as well. He had the same problem. Sometimes he was made to seem so stupid that you just it's just too easy to get past him. There's no credible threat from him.
I think it might have been better if some of the other characters, such as Skarkill, might have remained more sinister. We had Snapperjack. He was more creepy than anything else, but even he was slightly kind of had the creepiness taken away by this little hand puppet he had.
Yes, you're trying to be afraid of Rod and Emu. Not working. That we'll come to that in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think there is this pattern of sort of character deterioration, especially amongst the villains in Nightmare, that doesn't really do it an awful lot of good at being what it's best at, shall we say. I think one of the things Nightmare was best at was being scary, and an idiot is not scary.
It feels like we're being very down on it. There is a lot to like about Series 5.
For some reason, I do quite like this scene. I quite like some of the barbs that Mace throws Hans' way. But again, at the same time, they only work because Hans, at this point, is actually coming across as quite streetwise and therefore a bit sort of shifty, and you're not quite sure what he's going to do. I don't know. Maybe I am being a bit down unfairly, but I think there was more potential played this way than we got from the way he was portrayed later.
Well, listeners of Illusion, I bet you thought it never happened, but I do agree with Martin O about Sylvester Hands. This interesting conversation has got me thinking. No matter how threatening or not threatening an antagonist may seem, when it comes to their actual lethal potential, the gameplay really is the thing. If a team has goofed enough for Tim Child to decide it's time for them to die, even Sylvester Hands in full idiot mode can bring an end to the quest. And I'm down to appear on the episode in Series 6 where he does actually do that. I'm looking forward to it already.
Oh, they're at it already, Master. Giving out their names like there's no tomorrow.
Quiet, Pickle, or there'll be no tomorrow for you, and precious little more of today. Remember, team, there's knowledge to be had here, and on a quest, knowledge is wealth.
The team tell Kathryn to ask Mace if there's any useful knowledge that he can impart about the cup. As she asks nicely, he tells her that the forest that they are currently in is called Wolfglade and that it borders Wolfenden. He describes the town as a thriving little den of vice and inequity, a wretched hive of scum and villainy, if you will.
Yes.
He tells Kathryn to seek out Julius Scaramanga and to deliver a bag of gold that Mace owes him. He tells her that Julius will then give her some information and possibly directions into the mines of Malapith. More on that later on, because that's quite interesting, that.
Yeah. it links the series into the computer games, basically, which is an interesting development, because computer games to this point didn't really appear to owe very much to the series at all.
Now, be off with you. There's a portal in that hovel over there. It's Elvish, so friend Sly can't use it to follow you. Here, let me point you in the right direction, so to speak. Over there. Good luck to you.
And so the very next scene, once you go through the other side of the portal, one elf portal takes us all the way to Wolfenstein. And that conveniently helps move the plot forward, but I'm not really sure why Mace couldn't have dropped off the gold for himself, given how close by he is.
Okay, Kathryn, you're entering a village, and there's a few people in front of you, and houses to either side of you. Okay.
Say, wait. Hang up a minute there. Because it's just about to become your lucky day, isn't it? How would you like to take a step towards wealth and riches? Well, who wouldn't, eh? Poverty is just the sin of ignorance, if the truth be told. And Julius Scaramanga couldn't tell anything but. Well, I couldn't, could I? My word is my bond.
Julius Scaramanga, played by original Rocky Horror stage actor Raina Burton, immediately attempts to buy the ice shield from Kathryn, but sadly she declines. Sadly for us.
Yeah. I think the name Scaramanga is a mangled pronunciation of Scaramanga, who was the arch villain in the Bond movie, The Man with the Golden Gun. Scaramanga is a man with a golden gun. Scaramanga is a man with golden hair and robes, you see. He's also an obvious con man. I'm not too sold on his Brummie accent, though. It sounds very out of place. Burton, interesting, had also previously been yet another Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy actor, as he played the newsreader in episodes 2 and 6 of the TV version.
Oh, did he?
Yes, he was. He played the guy who was the subby for network newsreader who gets the big pile of papers dumped in his lap.
Okay.
At the end of the scene, he also appears on the stage in the Kakrafoon Desert with the gigantic speakers behind him.
Reports brought to you here on the Sub-Ether Wave Band, broadcasting around the galaxy, around the clock. And we'll be saying a big hello to all intelligent life forms everywhere, and to everyone else out there, the secret is to bang the rocks together, guys.
He then tries to buy the helmet and then the knapsack. Kathryn tells him that the monk told her to give him a bag of gold, and Scaramanga reacts exactly how you'd expect, by immediately asking for the money. The team tell Kathryn not to give it to him until she gets some information.
Yeah, they're making a real Horlicks of negotiating here, aren't they? Are they the ones responsible for what happened in Yugoslavia that year? Were they the diplomats sent by the United Nations?
He asks her the monk's name, and then basically after this back and forth actually has to tell her his name.
Communication problems, I think.
Yeah.
That's the polite way of putting it.
Well, I owe Macy a thing or two, so I'll tell you what I'll do, look. I'll give you this. It's a spyglass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you give me the purse. Come on, give me the purse. Give me the purse and I'll give you the spyglass.
No.
Well, I'll tell you what the spyglass is used for then, shall I? Well, what do you think a spyglass is used for?
Spying.
Exactly. Now, you can do a lot of spying here, you see, if you just give me the purse,
Hand them over, put your hand, take that, and kind of hand them over at the same time.
Thank you very much. Now, I'll tell you what, because I'm a fair bloke, and I am a fair bloke, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a bit more information, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, you need to find the gateway in, which is this big building down the place there a bit, huh? In it, you'll find the gateway. Get it?
Okay.
Yeah?
Right, yeah.
Oh, doubt it. Anyway, get smart, get lost.
Notice that Scaramanga did not give them directions to the mines of Malapith.
Nope.
Malapith is never actually shown on screen, but it is referenced in later episodes. According to David's entry on the Nightmare Lexicon, the mines of Malapith also appeared in Mindscape's 1991 Nightmare computer game. Pickle mentions the mines as a place that has persisted despite the dungeon phase changes in the game's manual opening scenario written by Tim Child, to the extent that it is featured on an arcane map housed at Nightmare Castle. Known as Old Goblin Breeding Grounds, the mines where the Shield of Justice was located were home to an artificially hybridized hobgoblin named Harg. This provides context for another Nightmare reference. In Quest 6 of Series 5, Skarkiel requested a hybrid goblin from Malapith from Lord Fear.
What I don't quite get is when it says that this has persisted in the dungeon. Well, why do we not see the mines during any of the quests? It's a reference that doesn't entirely make sense, but as I say, it does sort of tie the computer game into the series continuity. So anyway, the next passive path is long and dull. I mean, despite the intent behind it, the eye shield is still not really speeding up the gameplay at all. And the surroundings used here are very authentically medieval on the one hand, but they're much too scenic to provide any actual tension when compared with David Rowe's painted architecture.
It is effective in making the realm seem larger, but it's doing that at the expense of action.
Yeah, it's still supposed to be a game above everything else. Making the realm larger isn't really necessary. You know, I thought the game worked just fine as a dungeon.
The barter system is alive and well, Master. You're on your way.
Kathryn enters the gatehouse as Scaramanga suggested. There's food on the table, which gets knapsacked, giving her a much-needed energy boost.
Yeah, notice that Treguard no longer refers to the clock as life force, but energy levels. That becomes the standard phrase from now on.
It'll always be life force to us.
Yes, and it should be.
Well, what about the spyglass, Master? Why doesn't Kathryn put it to use?
Well, I'm not exactly certain how it is used. Kathryn, try holding it up in front of the eye shield. Just hold it nice and steady, and we'll see if we can make something of it.
I'm sure you remember as vividly as I do, listeners, the comments I was making at the end of Series 4 about pausing to reflect on significant moments, famous lasts, as we get to the end of a series. Watching Nightmare through, I've always found a very similar thing with significant firsts at the beginning of a series. And goodness me, what a significant first this spyglass scene / appearance of Lord Fear turns out to be. It seems very innocuous, I think, when you first see it. Like the rest of this episode, nothing really happens. It's purely a piece of scene setting. And the overarching importance, the very concept of spying on Lord Fear is going to have throughout the rest of Nightmare's run, is surely undetectable to the untrained eye. But with hindsight, we know this is something that is going to happen in very nearly every single episode of Nightmare yet to come. It's a tentative toe in the water of bringing Lord Fear into the show, but goodness me, how much it's going to lead on to. I always get a bit of a thrill when Treguard says after the sequence, that gentleman we just encountered at long range is Lord Fear. Despite first appearances, that is no throwaway name, and we'll be hearing it right up to the final line that Treguard ever utters on Nightmare. Such significant moments here in Wolfenden, and incidentally, if you want to visit Wolfenden, experience it exactly as it appears on screen, you can do so via the Weald and Downland Living Museum at Singleton near Chichester, West Sussex.
Here we have the first occurrence of something that will become a staple of Nightmare from this point onwards. Kathryn holds the spyglass up to the eye shield as instructed. We get a close-up of the spyglass showing a pale figure in skeletal armor. In the background, we see mysterious, ghostly knights with large swords.
Those are Fright Knights, but this, unless I'm much mistaken, is the opposition.
Away, you mindless bits of metal! What companions for an intellect that can freeze rivers and move mountains? Away, I'm trying to concentrate! Now, where is that pesky goblin master? And even more important, where is the dungeoneer he hunts for? Damnation! But although I see nothing, I feel something. Dragon's breath, but the impertinence of it! Something is spying on me! Very well, little spy. Take a good look. Because, you know, looks really can kill.
Quick, get her to throw it down!
Put it down, Kathryn! Throw it down, Kathryn!
Right, okay.
I can't help feeling that this game is getting a lot more dangerous than it used to.
Pickle, you must stop thinking of this as a game. Listen, team, that gentleman we just encountered at long range is Lord Fear.
So what would have happened exactly if the Dungeoneer hadn't put the spyglass down? Do you think it would just have been a simple life force drain?
Yeah, probably a bit like the Destructor that we saw in season 2 and 3, when you pick it up and immediately your life force starts to diminish. So I do think about the spyglasses. They were a major plus to the series, to the structure and development of quests. It allowed the quests to become coherent storylines and therefore be more plot driven. And it also added something that had been rather lacking in earlier years, which is greater exploration of the characters of the bad guys. I think that in itself is one of the reasons why Lord Fear became much more interesting than Monk Dread. The spyglasses gave him room to interact with other characters more, and for the audience to see him plotting and manipulating events. Monk Dread could seriously have done with scenes like that.
The way I see it, Lord Fear is much more of a bad guy than Mogdred ever was, because Lord Fear isn't necessarily interested in playing the game.
Lord Fear is just trying to win. Mogdred clearly felt very, very tied down by the rules.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to have been able to step outside of them. But Lord Fear, at the end of every season, he keeps on breaking the rules. Arbitrary though the rules are, in that respect, yeah, you could say he is more of a bad guy.
The Lord Fear, we should say, obviously played brilliantly by Mark Knight.
Lord Fear's dialogue, as the series passed, becomes more and more sarcastic, and Mark has the perfect voice for sarcasm.
Yeah, and more improvised as well.
Noticeable Traeguard refers to Lord Fear as the opposition. In this season, the opposition are a much more coherent organisation and not just a stand-in name for whoever's in charge of the bad guys. The Fright Nights in the sequence are really just models on a kind of conveyor machine.
Yeah.
And they're filmed moving around on top of it, and moving backwards and forwards. And then that video is blue screened into the background behind Lord F.
They're still creepy as hell, though, aren't they?
They're actually made quite creepy by the fact that they're enlarged, and they've got a ghostly quality because they don't appear to have any legs. They're quite remote from the Fright Night Gundrada referred to in season 4. The reference to that pesky goblin master is an indicator that Scarkill may soon enter the fray.
Now the team have a better idea of who and what they're up against. The team move on via another passive path.
And into Wolfglade 2!
Okay, Kathryn, you're just about to enter a wood, it looks like. And there's, I don't know what's on the ground. It's some kind of yellow stuff. And
stand right where you are, or I'll make a pincushion out of you. Grief, they're sending some weekly specimens here nowadays. No wonder the opposition keeps on having them for breakfast.
I love how the advisors jump out of their skin when Gwendolyn appears.
Yeah, she does bellow a bit, doesn't she? I have to say, Juliet Henry Massey, she has a powerful voice, but she's one of the weaker cast members in terms of her ability to improvise convincingly. And she does have some very weak scenes throughout season 5 when she's struggling to force the scene to rejoin the script. She's not a bad actress, but she's not a great improviser.
So Gwendolyn the Green Warden is Juliet Henry Massey's only IMDb credit. I'll have to ask Jason if she pops up in Time Busters.
Not impossible.
We do know that she also appeared in music videos for NXS and AC/DC. The NXS song Disappear and the AC/DC song Are You Ready? In the latter one, she appears as a prison warden.
I think, as I say, given the trouble she has improvising, the answer to the second one is no, she isn't. And Disappear kind of sums up what happened to her at the end of season 5. Yeah, she did play Icy Knickers herself, Queen Isandra, later in the season as well. But Juliet Henry Massey did not have a long career in Nightmare, or indeed in acting, by the looks of it.
No.
I don't suppose you have an elder brother by any chance, do you? A tall elder brother?
I'm afraid not, no. Well,
trouble with this 11th century is it's all big monsters and short men. Not that this is the 11th century, of course. But the powers that be seem to have used it as a recruiting den.
This doesn't come across right to me, this whole do you have an older brother thing. It just comes across as a bit awkward.
The way Kathryn was responding, she did say, after she said she doesn't have an older brother, she did then say, well, as though she was going to say something slightly different. But then she seemed to back out on it a little bit. It does feel a little bit like this really isn't a conversation to be having with a teenager, because it's just a subject that teenagers feel awkward about.
Yeah.
It's not that it's inappropriate, it's just not really material for them.
No. But aside from clearly being a little starved of romance, Gwendolyn is all about business. She tells Kathryn that if she wants to pass word, she'll have to please her, which is where the older brother thing maybe would have come in a bit handy. But instead, she poses a riddle.
The truth alone is all you need. So name the tree with the flying seed.
The one that everybody most associates it with is, of course, the sycamore. We get it right impressively quickly, so that's one of their better moments.
Although some accounts claim that sycamore trees were only brought to England in the 1500s, it is believed by many that the Romans brought them here. The unusual seeds called samaras have wing-like projections that can help them move farther than most other tree seeds when they get caught in the wind. Because they gave the correct answer, Gwendolyn tells them that the password, Saracen, will get them past the first blocker. First mention of the blockers. This was relevant in earlier series, but it seems to be even more so now. You get something, and then the very next room, you need it.
It does sometimes feel like they've only added it in as an afterthought and they've hurried through it.
Yeah.
You could well argue it makes the story more coherent, but I do agree. I'd rather it was 2 or 3 rooms further down rather than straight away.
Now, here's your path, and don't delay. There's green wood to be found on every level, so we may meet again.
Thanks very much. Right, Kathryn. You're in. What?
Food, I think. You always need food.
Kathryn has emerged in a large open courtyard. There's a photographic grey wall with a doorway to her left and a more ramshackle-looking CGI wall in front of her.
You can tell something's going to happen with that wall straight away because it doesn't really fit in with anything around it. You can tell there's something about to move.
Yeah, it's like in the old cartoons where the door that opens is the one that's a slightly different colour.
A character is staying stock still, but there's something slightly different about the shading of his arm, which makes you know that he's going to start moving his arm.
There's a block next to her that has some kind of food on it. We can't really see what. But as soon as it's knapsacked, a face emerges from the wall in front of her. It slowly moves forward until it's obscuring the doorway.
The opposition's triggered a blocker.
Move back quickly.
Move back, Kathryn.
The guards of Early Nightmare, who requested passwords, are largely gone. They have now been replaced with automated blockers. This appears to have been a cost-cutting technique, as blockers are unlikely to demand money, yet they cannot be bribed. Fortunately, though, Kathryn was able to obtain the password from Gwendolyn.
Password.
Kathryn, say
Saracen.
Sorry?
Say Saracen.
Saracen.
Step forward.
Step forward a bit. Oh, there was a wall and it had come towards you, it had a face.
The blockers have even less personality than the war monsters of the past. All they basically say is password.
Even the gargoyle that just repeated the word doom over and over again had more personality than the blockers. They're not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, they're an obstacle. They're a threat, which is pretty few and far between so far.
Yeah.
You know, at least there's some kind of menace. And it also has to be said, as we see in a later quest, the CGI now makes it possible to animate the blockers eating dungeoneers. Things are moving forwards technologically. You just rather think, oh, it's a shame that they didn't have this technology available 3 years earlier so that they could actually animate, for instance, Akash being eaten by Igneous. Because I didn't get any of the riddles right.
I'm sure you'll be interested to know, listeners, that I've made a solemn promise to myself not to initiate a petty former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia-style debate on this podcast concerning the subject of wall monsters versus monster walls versus the Brolican. I'm sure I speak for temporal discussion as a whole when I say you are free to use the term wall monster as widely or as narrowly as you wish, without fear of judgment or persecution. However, just to get it out of the way now, I'd like to put on record that I personally agree completely with what Martin H. is about to say, and I believe the Clue Room wall monsters to be fully sentient creatures from the netherworld, which were originally imprisoned in the dungeon walls by the Gruagarch.
My theory about the blockers, about why they have so little personality, even compared to the wall monsters and the gargoyles, is that wall monsters and gargoyles, whilst they are made of rock or whatever, they are still living creatures. Whereas blockers are quite obviously just enchanted walls.
I mean, it occurs to me that wall monsters are basically just enchanted walls.
Okay, sentient creatures then.
Yeah, well, sentience could probably be achieved by enchantment.
Or possibly, but I don't think the blockers are sentient.
For whatever reason, Mogdred decided to imbue the wall monsters with more sentient personality than Lord Fear imbued the blockers with.
But I'm not sure that the mall monsters are actually created by Mogdred. They seem too helpful.
There's a case of saying that, yeah. They're probably invented by the Gruagach originally. But anyway, they get the password right, so the blocker disappears, revealing the doorway, and the team guide Kathryn out. I rather like the way when the blocker retreats, it seems to be in such a massive hurry that it ends up leaving bricks behind, tangling in midair. I don't know if that's just out-of-date CGI.
I think it just looks better like that. Password. Saracen. Oh,
it really does look like it's scarpering.
It's machinery, Master. It's not natural, I say. You wouldn't catch me riding on one of these things, even if it does lead to level 2.
Oh, silence, Elfwit. After hitching a lift on a dragon's back, I can't imagine this sort of apparatus holds much terror for Kathryn.
Okay, Kathryn, you seem to be in a kind of room. There's metal on the walls and there's a brick wall in front of you. Seems to be a lift, I think. Yeah. I think you better just sit tight for a moment.
What sort of lift is it?
Well, it may be mechanical, but it's also spellbound. And you want to get to level 2, don't you?
The team don't seem too sure about wanting to get to level 2, but after a lot of hand-holding from Treguard and Pickle, they eventually tell the lift to move.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, actually, when they do that, Tim Child just had enough of listening to them and just decided to get the descender moving.
Yeah.
What they should have said was, go down. Pickle was trying to prompt them to give a direction. But as I say, I think Tim Child had just had enough and just said, oh, for heaven's sake, just make the damn thing move. It's just getting ridiculous. So it doesn't say great things about this team, does it?
No. This is actually quite an impressive display of CGI for television at the time.
Yeah.
The descender takes them down to level 2. We see glimpses of outside areas through windows as Kathryn descends.
Yeah, you do rather wonder what all these other places are meant to be, though, and what the consequences would be stopping at any of them. Are they level 2s for other quests, perhaps? The descender works a little like the 5-door chamber back in Neil's quest in season 2. It's sort of an interconnection points in space and time.
Yes.
Say goodbye to the Wellways, by the way, folks. We won't be seeing them as a passageway between levels again.
And the apparatus finally comes to a halt in front of 2 doors. One of them has the image of a Fright Night over it, which the team take to be a bad omen. The exit through the other door. The passive path takes Kathryn up some steps, down a corridor, and through a doorway. So having gone all the way this way down, she now needs to go up.
Yeah. Again, the ice shield footage here is too long and monotonous to watch. I should mention, it was quite commonplace in the first 3 seasons that a doorway would have a symbol on it or above it, and you could interpret from that which path was the best one for you to take. That is a tendency that's noticeable by its absence from this point on.
Well, the thing is, as we noticed in Series 4, the choice of doorways kind of became a bit more limited as well.
They clearly wanted to reduce the amount of decision-making the teams have to make. Which is understandable because a lot of the teams could be very, very slow at making up their mind about anything. So they just made it more openly linear. The truth is, the series was always pretty linear anyway. It's just it was given the illusion of not being so by having alternative exits. But they were now being more open about it to reduce a lot of dithering by the teams, I think. You do occasionally get a Fright Night image above one door and no image above another. But that's about it, really, for that sort of decision-making. And whether it is actually correct to go the other way is never really established, because you could very well argue that you need to go towards the Fright Nights to find the quest object.
Right, now you're in a room, and there's a great big archway or fireplace straight in front of you, and 4 windows. And there's also a man in the room at a desk. So I think you ought to go and sit down.
Come, Kathryn, sit.
Kathryn has exited the descender into one of the photographic rooms. There's a large archway leading to an exit, above which are mounted a deer's head and what appears to be a coat of arms of some kind. There are 4 windows from which an eerie purple light seems to be shining. Oh no, the purple's coming back.
Yeah, horrifying.
At the desk near the centre of the room sits the great warlock Hordris. He invites Kathryn to sit down, but as she does so...
Phase shift complete, I'm afraid. And it appears to be completely effective.
What about the opposition, Master? Are all his forces frozen in time?
I'm afraid not, Pickle. They're not allowed to attack, of course, the rules. But there are some things down there that never sleep. More's the pity.
The credits show Smirkanov flying over Wolfendom before coming into land.
Yep. Is he still a warlock, Gorgeous, out of interest, or is he now a full-fledged wizard?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it says so in the next episode.
I didn't realise it was a hierarchy thing.
As the two Martins will be reminded when they get to grips with the next episode, there is indeed a hierarchy thing for sorcerers in Nightmare, at least for Hordris, as he is a warlock no longer, but now wizard of the first level, and pretty keen on further advancement. Thus, when we come back for Series 6, we find that he's a mage. That's the last you'll be hearing from me today, listeners, so I hope you found at least some interest in at least something I've had to say to you. I'll leave you with a final snippet of information that may prove interesting as you listen to the next bit of conversation. The room in which this episode has paused is the Great Hall from Headingham Castle in Essex.
I just don't think that room has any place in Nightmare. It's
Yeah.
It's too nice. It's too plush. I'm pretty sure it's a nicely decorated part of a castle, and being nicely decorated, you don't feel like you're treading into the unknown.
Mm. It's not the best start to a season, is it?
It is not. In terms of watchability, the removal of the silly purple haze from last year is a major comfort for our eyes.
Yes.
But in terms of gameplay, it's a little bit meh so far, isn't it? There's a distinct lack of threat in most scenes. The introduction of Lord F is probably the big plus point.
Yes.
It's already seen an uplift in the degree of wit and colour in the dialogue of the bad guys in just one scene. I think Hugo is now just being a bit too nice as the Dungeon Master, very explicitly on the side of the Dungeoneers. The visuals are getting more advanced to the point of spectacular, but they lack the chills of the darker, grimier environments of the early years, and that remains a problem all the way until the end of Season 7, really.
Yeah.
The team seem to have reached level 2 entirely by default, as there really hasn't been any serious obstacle in level 1 at all. We've seen worse teams, but they don't seem particularly sharp or assertive or decisive, so I can't really see them getting much further. And your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much. You got the nail on the head there, really.
I mean, it's nice to get some, because it's the start of a new season, we're getting some new architecture. And in that respect, it's nice. And certainly a breath of fresh air after the sameness of Season 4.
And let's not forget Smirkanov as well.
It's a very well-made puppet.
He's still a mute character at the moment. He will come into his own in later seasons and be voiced by the late Clifford Norgate.
I have to say that without him talking, I do find a lot of his flight scenes in Season 5 rather dull. You know, they look spectacular. The first one looks pretty spectacular because we haven't seen this before. But by the third or fourth one, you're screaming out for somebody to talk and for some kind of interaction. Because once again, the Dungeoneer, although we've got Smirkanov in front of it, sort of flapping his wings, in the end, it's just another passive path.
Yeah. And fair play to Tim Child. He saw that problem and then he fixed it.
Yeah, he came up with a way of resolving that by simply giving Smirkanov a voice and a personality, a rather pompous personality, which is in keeping with previous dragons.
Yeah, and Clifford Norgate was the perfect person to actually voice him as well.
Yes, it's just a pity it wouldn't happen in this season, that's all.
There is a lot to like about this episode, as you say. First appearance of Sly Hands, first appearance of Lord Fear.
Nice to see Brother Mace coming back.
Yeah. And of course, we got Julius Scaramanga as well.
Jury's still out on the Brummie accent with him, but he does have some interesting storylines later on. He's more interesting in Season 6 than he is in Season 5.
Yeah, it's his interactions with Arwok.
Yeah, his rivalry with Arwok.
Yeah, the one who, his rivalry with the one who shall not be named.
General summing up is 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd say that 6 out of 10.
Yeah, it's watchable. It's not special in any particular way.
I was excited by it when I was 8 years old.
That was Season 5, Episode 1.
Yes. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please give us a rating and review on your platform of choice. It really helps us to grow our audience by reaching others who might be interested.
You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Nightmare Pod, and our Mastodon, that's Mastodon, is topspicy.social/@NightmarePod.
Oblique. Why can't you just say slash like a normal person?
Because some people might get the slash the wrong way around.
Most people would say /.
Oblique is quicker.
Oblique is obscurer. We're also Nightmare Pod on Threads, and our Instagram is Temporal Discussion, just to be difficult.
Yes, of course, just to make life complicated.
We're Nightmare Pod on Facebook too. And you can also now follow us on Blue Sky, where we're nightmarepod.bsky.social.
If you want to support the podcast, we're Nightmare Pod on Patreon.
Speaking of Patreon, here's a shout out to Keepers of the Book of Quests, David and Rabbit, Paul McIntosh, Peter Pulsford, and Scott Evans.
Advisors Benjamin Bloom, David Thompson, Kim Harder, which remains the silliest surname in the world. Kim Stewart Crossley, whoever she is, Lord Entropy, where the O is a 0, Paul Craddy, Peter Sidorn, and Pig Venus.
And let's not forget Dungeoneers Peter Corridge, Dan Heath, and Adam Battersby.
Support us on Patreon at Dungeoneer level or above to get your name mentioned on the podcast. Higher level perks also receive merchandise, have access to exclusive episodes, and if you pledge as a Keeper of the Book of Quests, we'll even offer you the chance to be a guest on the podcast.
Our website is nightmarepod.co.uk, where you can find all sorts of stuff such as fan books, the Nightmare drinking game, and links to our other social media accounts and stuff.
If you're looking for Temporal Discussion merchandise, including t-shirts, stickers, and other products, it's at nightmarepod.redbubble.com.
You can email us at podcast@nightmarepod.co.uk.
And just keep telling yourself,
it's only a podcast.
Isn't it?